As I said before, watching my brother play Mass Effect is probably what piqued my interest in the series at the beginning. It was just the right game at the right time. I found it enthralling. But I've said before, and I'll say again, the second game elevated my infatuation with this universe to a whole new level. It ignited my passion for video games that persists to this day. In a roundabout way, it's responsible for the birth of TheMightyMander and the reason I'm making this video in the first place. I was reading an article on Polygon a while back called How Mass Effect 2 Got Its Style, and it goes into how the second game used parallels between color and narrative tone to distinguish itself from its predecessor. Basically, to go along with the slightly darker story, you had harsher, dirtier colors. Oranges, reds, blacks, browns, and the like, where the first game was all blue and white, which is more characteristic of traditional, idyllic sci-fi like Star Trek. But all this talk about color means nothing if it has no effect on the game itself, and fortunately, this pairing of color and narrative tone comes together beautifully in Omega, the seedy underbelly of civilization in the Milky Way, which serves as the first of the hub worlds in Mass Effect 2. The moment I stepped onto Omega for the first time, fresh off my brand new Normandy, enamored with what would eventually become my favorite game of all time, in this moment, it hits me that this world is a whole lot bigger than I could ever realize while watching my brother play Mass Effect 1. The cushy veil of comfort and security on the Citadel is only the surface. Omega is the real world. It's got crime, poverty, disease, power imbalance, warring factions. Omega is home to a few of the more standout missions in the early stages of Mass Effect 2, like the recruiting mission for Archangel, the righteous vigilante who turns out to actually be Garrus, which was a great surprise for me the first time I saw it. But just arriving there for the first time, stepping into a dark, dingy hallway, immediately harassed by a stranger and shaken down by a Batarian tough working for who is effectively a mob boss, it's dirty, it's shady, it's new. It's a whole new perspective on the Mass Effect universe, and in my experience, it's just unforgettable. The story and pacing in the original Mass Effect can feel slightly disjointed at times. In the pursuit of player freedom, they end up going a bit too far in the other direction, leaving you to just sort of roam around the galaxy after keeping you on rails for the first few hours of the game. But around halfway through the main story, it puts you back on track in a big bad way and leads to one of my favorite story missions in the entire series. The Council informs you that a Solarian Special Tasks Group has information about Saren and that they are stranded on a planet called Vermeer and need assistance. Their commander, Captain Kirrahe, who also happens to be one of my favorite side characters in the entire series, informs you that Saren intends on growing a tank-bred army of Krogan, a feat thought previously impossible due to widespread infertility on the Krogan homeworld. So those are the stakes, the potential uprising of what you at that point know to be the most brutish and hostile race in the galaxy, all under the control of Saren and the Reapers. And because you can't get a signal off world, it's just your squad and Kirrahe's left to take on the entire base and stop Saren. And meanwhile, you've got Rex, your Krogan squad member, grappling with the moral dilemma of stopping Saren while also decimating what appears to be the only hope for his people. So before you move on the base, you've got to go talk to Rex, and he's angry. You know he's angry enough to kill, and you've got to talk him down. This is quite possibly the best example of Mass Effect's dialogue system in any of the three games. It is a verbal boss fight, a chance to use your charisma to gain the loyalty of your most intimidating and enigmatic squad member. And it's intense, with a subtle, bassy backing track, a slow escalation of tension in the performances by Mark Meer or Jennifer Hale as Shepard, and Stephen Barr as Rex, as the moral conflict comes to a standoff. And this isn't a fake out. Rex can die here by your hand if you don't play your cards right or prepare yourself properly. But if you do manage to talk him down, you can't help but sit back in your chair and just let out a sigh of relief. You've now got a pissed off Krogan in your corner, ready to throw down. Then, just to make everything a little more epic, you get a fantastically well-written, inspirational speech from Kirrahe, then progress through by far the best mission in the game, with some amazing reveals, an awesome face-to-face with Saren, and a heartbreaking heroic sacrifice from one of your other squad members. Make no mistake, this mission is Mass Effect, and it cements itself in no small part by kicking off with the confrontation with Rex. Depending on your choices and your preparedness, you can lose a lot of familiar faces in Mass Effect 3, but there are two that are impossible to avoid, and one of them is our favorite model of a badass motherfucking scientist Solarian, Mordin Solus. The first long sequence of events in Mass Effect 3 focuses around recruiting the Turians and the Krogan for the war against the Reapers, but the Krogan won't help unless they get a cure for the genophage, the sterility plague that has stunted the growth of the Krogan population for centuries. The responsibility for curing the genophage falls on our good buddy Mordin. He takes on this responsibility with pride, as he was one of the scientists responsible for making sure the genophage stayed in effect, and now feels that altering that course is the best way forward. A lot of great little moments happen along the way, one example being Calros, the mother of all Thresher Maws, taking down a Reaper, which is a heavy-handed but awesome microcosm of the entire conflict of the series, for organic life fighting back against the synthetic genocide. But it eventually ends with Mordin and Shepard at the base of the tower, which will dispense the cure, for one final conversation as the building crumbles around them, and it ends in one of three ways. If you cure the genophage, Mordin takes the elevator up, dispenses the cure, and sacrifices his life to save the Krogan people. If you sabotage the genophage cure, you can either shoot Mordin when he resists, or convince him to walk away. The ending in which Shepard shoots Mordin in the back shook me to the core the first time I saw it. Just the idea of Shepard actually shooting and killing a former squad mate in this way was extremely shocking. And the noble sacrifice ending was a wonderfully poignant way to send off the character. But the one thing that really stood out to me, and what cemented this as one of the best moments in the series, was this one line from Mordin when Shepard questions his decision to cure the genophage when he worked so hard to maintain it.
Every time we've talked about this before, you've defended the genophage. How can you change your mind now? I made a mistake!
Okay, credit where credit is due to whoever wrote that line, and to William Salyers for delivering such a strong performance, especially considering that Michael Beatty's performance in Mass Effect 2 was probably so hard to follow up. With this line, you finally hear the pain in Mordin's voice, the years of regret for this decision finally coming out after being rationalized and buried away for so long. Shepard had a point. Throughout Mass Effect 2, Mordin repeatedly defended his actions, not through emotion, but logic and reason, suggesting it was the best outcome, which, all in all, it may have been at the time. But to hear him finally admit that it was a mistake was a truly remarkable moment for his character, and a powerful end for his story arc, which I'd argue was one of the original trilogy's strongest. Oh, and I'm gonna throw an honorable mention in here for that moment when you first hear Mordin sing Gilbert and Sullivan. That is just classic.
I am the very model of a scientist Solarian. I've studied species Turian, Asari, and Batarian. I'm quite good at genetics as a subset of biology because I am an expert, which I know is a tautology. My xenoscience studies range from urban to agrarian. I am the very model of a scientist Solarian.
One thing that Mass Effect 3 does very well is remind you of the stakes of your mission. The themes of war and the hopelessness it instills in its participants are all over the place in every other line of dialogue. And you can say what you will about this, I personally think the dialogue gets pretty stale after a while, but the in-game conflict that, in my experience, best exemplifies this within the overall narrative of the game itself is the sequence of missions involving the war for the Quarian homeworld between the Quarians and the Geth. It's a war within a war. It's well-intended chaos with numerous unforeseen consequences and complexities. One such complexity is the fact that the Geth took a deal with the Reapers in order to defend themselves from the Quarians because they struck first. I could go on all day about how this blurs the line between good and bad when it comes to the Geth and the Quarians, and how it complicates the themes of artificial intelligence presented in the franchise thus far. But this sequence culminates in perhaps the best example of Shepard's distilled, unbridled bravery in the face of impossible odds. It turns out that the Reaper base on Rannoch's surface was just an actual Reaper destroyer camping out underground helping the Geth. The squad begins to escape while they have a window, but Shepard makes a realization. If they leave, the Reaper recovers, the Geth grow stronger, and the Quarians are dead. So Shepard jumps out of the car and faces down the Reaper, alone. armed only with a targeting laser to guide the fleet's fire. And frustrating though this fight may be from a gameplay perspective, it's just too spectacular to leave off this list. One person, the champion of the Milky Way galaxy, standing fast against an overwhelmingly powerful force, risking life and limb to save a planet to which they don't even belong. This is a truly spectacular climactic moment in the conflict between the Quarians and the Geth, but it doesn't just end when the Reaper falls. In its dying moments, the Reaper speaks to you and mentions Shepard by name, saying that Harbinger has spoken of them in the past. Similar to how Harbinger does back in ME2, the fact that this thing actually makes the effort and talks to you is a significant event in and of itself. And add to that the fact that Shepard is becoming something of a boogeyman for the Reapers. And just to cap off the whole sequence, after the Reaper is dead, reality slaps back and you're presented with one of the most extreme moral dilemmas in the entire series, wherein you have to end the conflict between the Geth and Quarians one way or another. This sequence does not let up, and it's all the better for it. There's really only one thing in the entire series that I think lands just a little bit harder. This is a bit tricky because the extensive build-up to this quote-unquote moment is just as important as the content of the sequence itself. You may remember back in my top 10 favorite games video that I did a while back where I absolutely just fawned over the final mission in Mass Effect 2. I said the assault on the Collector base was one of my favorite sequences in any game ever made, and that's still true. At first it was just an insurmountable task for me to pick one moment throughout this entire fantastic sequence to focus on. So I got to asking myself what part of this mission really stood out. And the answer I reached was definitely the escape at the end of the mission, but upon reaching this conclusion, I asked myself why. Escapes like this one happen a few times throughout the game, granted none as grand in scale, but what makes these few scenes have so much impact? Well, part of it I think is the musical score. The score for the Suicide Mission is one of my favorite pieces of music ever put onto a video game. The orchestration is fantastic, using brass and percussion instruments, a little bit of low-end synth, and a choir to give it some extra weight. The time signature is 7/8. It's a breathtaking composition, one that honestly still gives me goosebumps whenever I listen to it. But the other reason I figured out is because working in tandem with the epic payoff of escaping the station is the huge amount of buildup presented by the events preceding it. The mission is divided into several smaller sequences, each with a specific objective. The first takes place on the Normandy, in the debris field leading up to the Collector base. This tests your preparedness by really putting some stress on your ship and its upgrades. Then there are several within the base itself, wherein you have to pick a specialist and a second fire team leader in addition to your own squad to perform certain tasks, which also puts them at the risk of actually dying if you haven't earned their loyalty or if you pick the wrong person for the wrong job. The final sequence sees you and your squad of 2 travel to the inner sanctum of the base to destroy it, while the rest of the squad hangs back and holds the line. The boss fight is okay. It's way better in concept than it is in execution. You're fighting a half-assembled human Reaper hybrid harvested from the corpses of millions of abducted human colonists. But after the boss fight, when you and your squad wake up and have to make a mad dash back to the ship, while Harbinger continues to taunt you even in defeat, once you're back on the ship, you have to outrun the explosion from the base in an amazing cutscene, and then, and only then, do you get to take a breath. And at that point, you deserve one. The Mass Effect trilogy has a bit of a pattern when it comes to the point of no return. In the first game, there's no turning back once you go to Ilos to find the Conduit. In Mass Effect 3, there's no turning back once you raid the Elusive Man's base. In this game, it's the Omega-4 relay, and when I look at all 3 of them side by side, the Omega-4 relay just stands out. It's the most straightforward out of the 3, while at the same time being the most mysterious. You don't end up somewhere familiar like the Citadel or Earth. You're going through a relay that you only know leads to the galactic core, and that no one, save for the Collectors, has ever returned from passing through it. There's a palpable sense of dread to that idea. Maybe I'm blowing this way out of proportion. Maybe it's nothing more than just my favorite level of my favorite game, but this level, culminating in that final escape, comes together in a way that I had never experienced before and really haven't since on the same level. It was just the right thing for me to play at the right time, and I'm proud to have it top this list. Hey everybody, thanks for watching the video. If you missed part 1, you can check that out at the link in the description. But yeah, man, that's the list. And you know, these videos have been in the making for a very, very long time. I've had this script ready to go for, well, not ready to go, I've been changing it for the better part of a year now. But yeah, I got one more video for you guys this month. Try and get it out by the end of the month. No promises, but I will do my very best. But yeah, Mass Effect content doesn't really land all that well on YouTube, so if y'all could show this one some love, I would greatly appreciate it. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Drop a like down below. I've been streaming a lot lately. You know, head over to my Twitch if you want to see some streams. I've been streaming Doom. I'm going to be streaming Spider-Man when that comes out. Looking forward to that. Lots of good stuff on the horizon. Hope you'll be there to join me. Thank you very much. I love you all. Appreciate you. Bye-bye.